Welcome back to Secrets Exposed. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. You're the reason these stories worth sharing. Tell us where you're watching from, city or country. We're amazed by how far these tales reach. To get daily new and amazing stories for you, subscribe our channel and press bell icon. All right, let's begin. The storm raged with an almost vengeful force that night. Rain pounded against the cracked porch roof, dripping through loose shingles in uneven streams. The old wooden boards, slick with water, glistened under the dim yellow porch light. The wind howled, rattling the loose screen door, as if the house itself was warning of something broken inside. Mark pulled into the driveway, his headlights cutting across the rain-soaked yard. His chest still ached from the hospital stay, but nothing prepared him for what his eyes locked on next. A small figure lay curled in the corner of the porch. It was his son, Ethan. The boy's hair was plastered against his forehead, soaked through until it dripped into his eyes. His t-shirt clung to his thin frame like wet paper, and his jeans were dark and heavy with water. The old blanket wrapped around him was no more than a rag, torn at the edges, offering no warmth against the cold night air. Ethan's body shook with violent shivers, his lips turning a shade of blue that chilled Mark more than the rain ever could. Mark's heart clenched. He stumbled forward, almost slipping on the wet boards as he dropped his hospital bag to the ground. "Ethan!" His voice cracked, heavy with panic. "Son!" The boy stirred, blinking weakly at the sound. His eyes, red and swollen, met his father's. For a split second, disbelief flashed across Ethan's face, as though he couldn't trust what he was seeing. Then, in a voice barely louder than the rain itself, he whispered, "Dad, you came back." Mark crouched down, scooping his son into his arms. The boy's body was icy cold, trembling against him, fragile as glass. Rain splashed across Mark's back as he shielded Ethan, his jaw locking in anger and confusion. He glanced around the dark, silent house behind them, questions clawing at his mind. Why was his son out here? Where was his wife? Why was Ethan left asleep in a storm like a stray dog? As thunder cracked overhead, Mark knew one thing. Something was terribly, terribly wrong inside that house. And this was only the beginning. Mark's arms tightened around Ethan as he stepped off the porch and into the house. The boy's small frame clung to him, trembling not only from the cold but from something deeper, fear. Every step Mark took echoed through the silent home. The storm outside muffled once the door closed behind them. The house should have felt familiar, safe. But tonight it felt hollow. The living room was dim, only lit by the flicker of a lamp left on the floor. Toys that once scattered the carpet were gone. The air smelled faintly of smoke, bitter and sharp, as if something had been burned recently. Mark's eyes darted across the room, unsettled. He carried Ethan to the couch, gently setting him down. The boy winced as the wet fabric peeled from his skin. Mark quickly grabbed an old throw blanket draped over the chair and wrapped it around him. He knelt, brushing back strands of soaked hair from Ethan's forehead. "Talk to me, buddy. What happened? Why were you out there?" Ethan's lips quivered as he tried to speak. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, staring down at the floor. His fingers twisted into the blanket, his chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. Mark's heart sank. He knew this silence. It wasn't the silence of a child who had no words. It was the silence of someone afraid to speak. "You don't have to be scared. You're safe now," Mark said softly, his own voice shaking despite the reassurance. "No one's going to hurt you while I'm here. I promise." For a moment, Ethan's eyes lifted, searching his father's face. Then, in a voice so faint it almost got lost under the hum of rain outside, he whispered, "He told me not to come in." Mark's blood froze. "Who?" he demanded, but Ethan looked away, his shoulders curling inwards, shrinking into himself. Mark rose, scanning the room again. His gaze lingered on the hallway, on the open door at the end. A strange unease tightened his chest. Something had happened here while he was gone. Something that had left his son outside in the rain, like he didn't belong in his own home. And Mark intended to find out what. Mark's footsteps echoed heavily as he moved down the hallway. Each step carried a weight of dread, a knot twisting tighter in his chest. He pushed Ethan's bedroom door open wider, bracing himself, but nothing could have prepared him for what he saw. The room was empty. The bed was gone. The dresser, too. The shelves that once held Ethan's favorite toy cars and storybooks were stripped bare, leaving behind only faint outlines on the walls where posters had been ripped away. The air smelled of smoke, sharp and acrid, stinging his throat. In the corner, a blackened scorch mark spread across the wooden floor. Small flakes of ash still clung to the boards, fragile reminders of what had been destroyed. Mark crouched, his hand trembling as he picked up a half-burned scrap of fabric. It was part of Ethan's pajama top, the one with little rocket ships he'd worn the last time Mark tucked him in before going to the hospital. His stomach lurched. He turned sharply to Ethan, who stood in the doorway, shivering under the oversized blanket. The boy's face was pale, eyes wide, as though stepping into his own room hurt more than the rain outside ever could. "Ethan," Mark said, his voice raw. "Where's your bed? Your clothes? Who did this?" For a moment, Ethan didn't answer. He hugged the blanket tighter around his shoulders, his small body shrinking as if he could disappear inside it. Finally, he whispered, "He burned them." Mark's blood ran cold. "Who burned them, son?" Ethan's lip trembled, and tears welled up in his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice cracked, carrying a weight no child should bear. "Mom's new man. He said I don't belong here. He said I'm not family anymore." Mark staggered back, gripping the charred scrap in his hand until his knuckles whitened. His mind raced, fury, disbelief, and heartbreak colliding in a storm of their own. His little boy hadn't just been neglected. He had been erased. And someone in this house had stood by and let it happen. Mark's grip tightened around the charred scrap until the brittle fabric disintegrated in his fist. His chest heaved as he tried to steady his breath, but fury pressed hard against his ribs. He turned back to Ethan, whose small frame looked even smaller in the doorway. "Where's your mom right now?" Mark asked, his voice low, fighting to stay calm. Ethan's eyes flickered with hesitation. He shifted his weight, his toes curling into the carpet. Finally, he whispered, "In her room." Mark's jaw tightened. He stormed down the hallway, his footsteps pounding louder than the thunder outside. The master bedroom door was half open. Inside, the dim light of a lamp revealed Lisa, his wife, sitting at the edge of the bed, scrolling absently through her phone. She looked up when she heard him. For a split second, shock flashed across her face, but then it softened into something colder, annoyance. "Mark," she said flatly, "you weren't supposed to be home yet." The words stung more than the rain had. He stood frozen in the doorway, staring at her, his voice breaking. "You left Ethan outside, in the storm. Why?" Lisa's gaze darted away, her fingers tightening around her phone. "It's complicated." Mark stepped into the room, anger finally breaking through his restraint. "No, it's simple. He's 9 years old. His things are gone, his clothes are burned, and he was freezing on the porch like a stray dog. And you let it happen." Lisa flinched, her lips parting, but no words came out. Her silence was worse than denial. Behind them, a small voice trembled from the hallway. Ethan stood clutching the blanket. His eyes glistened as he whispered. She was watching. The words cut deeper than any blade. Mark turned back to Lisa, searching her face, desperate for even a flicker of shame or regret. Instead, he found only fear, not for Ethan, but for herself. That was the moment Mark realized the truth. She hadn't just stood by. She had chosen her silence. And in doing so, she had chosen someone else over her own son. Mark stood frozen, staring at Lisa, his chest rising and falling with barely contained rage. Her silence screamed louder than any excuse could. But before he could unleash the words burning on his tongue, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with shaking hands. One new message. From Lisa. His eyes scanned the screen, and his stomach turned to stone. "Don't come back tonight. We need space." Mark lifted his gaze, locking eyes with her. The glow of the lamp illuminated the guilt plastered across her face. His fingers tightened around the phone until the plastic creaked. "You sent me this," he hissed, holding the screen toward her. "While Ethan was freezing outside. While he had nothing. You told me not to come home. Lisa's lips trembled. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her eyes darting anywhere but at him. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "Then tell me what it is." Mark snapped, his voice cutting like glass. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you abandoned our son for him." Lisa's face paled. Her hand shook as she placed the phone down on the nightstand. "Mark, I didn't want to lose him." Mark blinked, stunned. "Lose who?" Her silence was the answer. The air in the room thickened, heavy with the weight of betrayal. The storm outside rattled the window, as if echoing the fury inside him. Ethan's small sob carried faintly from the hallway, piercing through Mark's heart like a blade. He stepped back, shaking his head. "You chose him over Ethan, over your own son." His voice broke, raw with disbelief. "And you had the audacity to warn me away." Lisa buried her face in her hands, her body trembling, but no denial came. For Mark, that was enough. His chest tightened with a single realization. This wasn't neglect. This was deliberate. Someone wanted him gone, and his wife had let them in. Mark couldn't stay in that room any longer. The air felt poisoned, heavy with betrayal. He turned on his heel and stormed back down the hall, his footsteps echoing like gunshots against the silence. Ethan's small figure was still curled in the blanket near the living room, watching his father with wide, worried eyes. Mark forced himself to soften, brushing his son's hair gently before whispering, "It's okay, buddy. Stay here. I'll fix this." But his chest burned with questions. His wife's silence, the cruel treatment of Ethan, the message telling him to stay away. It didn't add up. Something darker was hiding beneath the surface. Drawn by instinct, he walked into the kitchen. The faint smell of smoke clung to the air, sharper here, bitter enough to sting. His eyes landed on the trash bin tucked beneath the counter. The lid wasn't closed all the way. Mark hesitated, then lifted it. What he saw inside made his heart stop. Empty pill bottles. 3 of them. His hospital medication. Mark froze, his breath catching in his throat. He had left those bottles half full, carefully measured by the doctors before he was discharged. They were essential for his recovery. Medication no one should have touched. Yet here they were, drained, discarded like garbage. Beside them, glistening under the kitchen light, were shards of broken glass. They were small, jagged, almost glittering. He reached for one carefully, holding it up between his fingers. A sickening thought clawed into his mind. Was someone mixing these with his food? His drinks? His hand shook violently as the truth began to crystallize. This wasn't just about Ethan being mistreated. This wasn't random cruelty. Someone had been planning to erase him. The storm outside cracked with thunder, rattling the windows, as if mocking his realization. Mark dropped the shard back into the trash, his heart pounding so hard it echoed in his ears. From the living room, Ethan's voice trembled. "Dad, are we safe?" Mark swallowed hard, forcing calm into his tone, even as dread hollowed out his chest. "Yes, son," he lied gently, brushing Ethan's shoulder. "We're safe now." But deep inside, Mark knew the truth. They weren't safe at all. Mark's pulse thundered as he stared at the trash bin. Empty pill bottles. Broken glass. The evidence wasn't just unsettling. It was lethal. He closed the lid slowly, fighting to steady his breath, then turned toward the bedroom. He needed answers. Lisa was still perched on the edge of the bed when he entered, her hands pressed against her face. She looked up quickly, startled by the intensity in his eyes. "Where are my pills, Lisa?" Mark's voice was low, dangerous. Her brow furrowed. "What?" He took a step closer, his hands trembling with fury. "The medication I brought home from the hospital. It's gone. I just found the bottles in the trash, empty." Lisa's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "Don't play dumb with me," Mark snapped. "Those pills were keeping me alive. Why are they gone? Why was there glass in the trash with them?" Her hands twisted in her lap, knuckles white. She tried to hold his gaze, but failed, her eyes darting toward the door as if searching for escape. Finally, in a voice so faint it barely reached him, she whispered, "He told me it was better this way." Mark froze, every nerve in his body screaming. "He? Derek?" She nodded once, her chin trembling. "He said you'd only hold us back. that you'd never really recover. He said if you weren't here, we could be happy. I didn't stop him. The room tilted around Mark, rage and disbelief crashing over him like the storm outside. He gripped the dresser to steady himself. So you let him? You let him poison me? You let him throw our son into the rain. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I was scared, Mark. Scared of being alone. I didn't know what to do. Mark's laugh was hollow, bitter. You didn't know. You just chose the coward's way. From the hallway, Ethan's voice quivered. Dad? What's going on? Mark turned, his fury softening when he saw his son clutching the blanket, his eyes wide with fear. He forced a steady breath, crouching to Ethan's level. Nothing you have to worry about, buddy, he murmured, though the lie burned on his tongue. But in that moment, one truth was clear. Derek wasn't just cruel. He was dangerous. And Mark had to end this before it ended them. The storm outside had slowed to a steady drizzle, but inside the house, the air was heavier than ever. Mark sat on the edge of the couch, Ethan curled against his side, still wrapped in the blanket. The boy's head rested on his father's chest, his small hands clinging tightly, as if afraid Mark might vanish if he let go. Mark's thoughts raced. Lisa's confession still echoed in his ears. He told me it was better this way. Derek hadn't just poisoned Ethan's sense of belonging. He tried to poison Mark's life entirely. But why? Mark brushed a hand through his son's damp hair. Ethan, he said softly, can you tell me what Derek said to you? Anything you remember? Ethan hesitated, his eyes flickering with the kind of fear a child should never know. He pulled the blanket tighter around himself. He said, I don't matter. That dad's not really coming back. That once you're gone, it'll just be him and Mom. Mark's stomach twisted. Gone? He asked carefully. Ethan nodded. He told me that's why he burned my bed. He said I didn't need it anymore, because I wasn't family without you. The words hit like a hammer. Mark's fists clenched, fury surging through him. He forced himself to stay calm, but inside, the pieces were locking together. Derek hadn't just wanted Ethan out of the way. He had been preparing the house for a life without Mark. Mark leaned back, staring at the ceiling, his chest heaving. His wife's silence. The burned belongings. The missing pills. Derek's words to Ethan. It all formed a chilling picture. Derek wasn't just asserting control. He was erasing everything Mark had built, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of him or his son. Dad! Ethan's small voice broke his thoughts. Will he come back tonight? Mark tightened his arm around his son, swallowing the rage that burned in his throat. Not if I can help it, he said, his tone firm, steady. But deep inside, Mark knew Derek wasn't finished. Men like him never just walked away, which meant the storm had only just begun. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Mark kept Ethan close, every creak of the floorboards making him tense. The storm had thinned to a drizzle, but the air felt thick with something unspoken, as if danger lingered just beyond the walls. A sudden knock at the door made both of them jump. Ethan's grip tightened on his father's shirt. Mark stood, his hand instinctively reaching for the baseball bat, leaning near the coat rack. He opened the door cautiously. It was their neighbor, Mrs. Carter, a woman in her late 60s with tired eyes and a raincoat clinging to her shoulders. Her expression was hesitant, almost guilty. Mark, she said softly, glancing past him toward the living room. I need to tell you something. Mark stepped outside, closing the door behind him. What is it? His voice was low, edged with urgency. She glanced around, lowering her tone. I didn't want to get involved, but last night I heard shouting from your yard. Him, Derek. He was saying things. Awful things. Mark's stomach sank. What kind of things? Mrs. Carter's face tightened. He said once you were gone, the house would finally be his. That your boy would learn his place, or... She trailed off, shaking her head, unable to finish the thought. Mark's jaw clenched, fury simmering beneath his skin. You're sure? I swear it, Mark, she whispered. He wasn't just yelling. He was bragging, like he already had it all figured out. Mark rubbed a hand across his face, his heart hammering. The pills, the broken glass, Ethan in the rain, and now this. Derek hadn't just been cruel. He was plotting to take everything. Mrs. Carter placed a hand on his arm. Please protect that boy. Don't wait until it's too late. Mark nodded, his throat tight. Thank you. I won't let anything happen to him." As she left, the drizzle thickened again, drops striking the porch roof with renewed force. Mark stood there, staring into the darkness, his fists clenched. There was no doubt now. Derek wasn't just a threat. He was a predator waiting to strike. And Mark would not let him win. Mark closed the door slowly, his hand lingering on the handle as the weight of Mrs. Carter's words pressed down on him. Once he were gone, the house would be his. The sentence looped in his head like a curse. Inside, Ethan peeked out from the couch, his wide eyes searching his father's face. "Dad, who was that?" "Just a neighbor," Mark said softly, forcing calm into his voice. He walked over, crouched beside his son, and held his shoulders firmly. "Listen to me, Ethan. No matter what happens, I'm not going anywhere. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded slowly, though fear still clung to his small frame. Mark exhaled, his decision hardening like stone. This wasn't something he could handle with words anymore. Derek was escalating. Lisa was compromised. And Ethan, his boy, was the one paying the price. Mark picked up his phone. His hands shook, not from weakness, but from the gravity of what he was about to do. One call. That's all it would take. One call to change the course of everything. He dialed his lawyer. The conversation was short but sharp, every word heavy with urgency. Emergency custody, restraining orders, protective filings. Within minutes, papers were already being drawn. It was a step forward, but Mark knew legal walls couldn't keep Derek from trying something desperate in the meantime. That night, as rain whispered against the windows, Mark sat awake in the living room. Ethan slept curled against him, the blanket rising and falling with each fragile breath. Mark kept the baseball bat close, his eyes fixed on the door. Then, footsteps. Slow, heavy, right outside the house. The hair on Mark's neck stood on end. He rose carefully, bat in hand, his heart pounding. Ethan stirred, half-waking, whispering, "Dad." "Shoo," Mark soothed, pressing a finger to his lips. He moved toward the door, every muscle taut, the silence louder than thunder. But the knob never turned. The steps lingered, then faded into the night. Mark stood there in the dark, gripping the bat, his pulse roaring in his ears. Derek was close. Too close. And Mark knew the real storm was coming with him. Dawn crept over the neighborhood, gray and heavy, the storm clouds finally breaking into pale light. Mark hadn't slept. He sat rigid in the living room chair, the baseball bat across his lap, Ethan still curled against him beneath the blanket. Every creak of the house through the night had kept him on edge. But now, morning brought something else, the sound of engines. 2 police cars pulled into the driveway. Blue and red lights flickered against the damp windows. Mark carefully eased Ethan awake. "It's okay, buddy. They're here to help." He opened the door, bat still in hand, and waved the officers inside. Their presence filled the home with a tense authority. One of them, a tall woman with sharp eyes, spoke first. "We got the call from your lawyer. We need to take a look around." Mark nodded, leading them to the kitchen, his voice hoarse. "Check the trash bin. You'll see what he's been doing." The officers pulled on gloves, lifting the lid. One by one, they extracted the evidence, the empty pill bottles, their labels still showing Mark's name, the broken shards of glass glinting under the kitchen light. One officer's brow furrowed deeply. But it wasn't just the trash. When they searched outside, near the fire pit in the yard, their discovery made Mark's chest tighten all over again. Charred fabric, melted plastic, and twisted bits of metal lay buried beneath the ash. Among them, unmistakable fragments of Ethan's toys. And beside those, scorched pieces of pill bottles. The female officer's gaze hardened as she crouched down, inspecting the evidence. This isn't just abuse. This looks like intent. Mark's jaw tightened. Intent to what? She met his eyes grimly. To poison you. To destroy anything connected to you. The word struck like lightning. Everything Mark suspected now had weight. Derek hadn't only wanted Ethan gone from the family. He had wanted Mark erased, body, memory, legacy, until the house was his to claim. Mark felt Ethan slip his hand into his own, squeezing tightly. The boy's eyes brimmed with tears, but his voice was steady. "Dad, he wanted us gone." Mark knelt, holding him close. "Not us, son. Just me. He was trying to take me away from you." And for the first time, Mark realized Derek's cruelty wasn't random. It was calculated, and it was far from over. The sun had barely risen when the officers finished their search. The evidence, the burned belongings, the pill bottles, the broken glass, was bagged and logged. One of the officers turned to Mark, her tone firm. "We'll put out a warrant. He won't get far." But by the time they checked Derek's last known address, he was already gone. His truck missing. His phone disconnected. It was as though he had vanished into the storm itself. Mark stood at the doorway, Ethan's small hand gripping his tightly. Relief and unease battled inside him. Derek was gone, yes, but the shadow he left behind clung to every corner of the house. Lisa sat silently on the couch, her face streaked with tears, staring at the floor. When the officers asked if she wanted to give a statement, she only whispered, "I can't." Mark's jaw tightened. He looked at her, but all he felt was emptiness. The woman he once trusted had chosen silence over her own son's safety. She wasn't his partner anymore. She was just another part of the wreckage Derek had left. He turned back to Ethan, kneeling so they were eye level. The boy's eyes were tired, heavy from nights of fear. But beneath that fear was something else, hope. "It's over now," Mark said, brushing his son's damp hair back. "He's not coming back. I promise you, Ethan. From here on, it's just you and me." Ethan's lip trembled. Then he buried his face against his father's chest. "Dad, I feel safe now." Mark wrapped his arms around him, holding him tightly as if to shield him from everything the world could throw their way. He pressed his cheek against Ethan's hair, his voice low but firm. "You are my family. No one will ever take that from us." The house was quiet, save for the faint ticking of the wall clock. For the first time in weeks, there were no footsteps outside, no whispers of cruelty, no threats hanging in the air. By morning, Derek was gone without a trace. And those scars remained. Father and son had something stronger, each other. The storm had passed, but Mark swore one thing. If darkness ever returned, it would never touch his son again.